The rain hammered against the windows of our small cottage in the Cotswolds, mimicking the storm raging inside me. For 20 years, I'd believed my life with Bronwyn was a serene landscape of rolling hills and gentle streams. I was a landscape painter, content in capturing the quiet beauty of our world. Bronwyn managed a small bookshop in Stow-on-the-Wold, surrounded by the scent of old paper and the hushed whispers of literary dreams. I never suspected that beneath her calm exterior, a different story was being written. It started subtly, like a watercolor bleeding at the edges. Bronwyn began working late, claiming inventory issues or special events. Her phone, usually left carelessly on the kitchen counter, became her constant companion, guarded with a vigilance that felt foreign. I chalked it up to the stresses of her job, the changing retail landscape. I was a fool. One Tuesday, she told me she had a book reading in Oxford and wouldn't be home until late. I kissed her goodbye, a familiar peck on the cheek, and watched her drive away in our aging Volvo. A sense of unease settled over me, a brushstroke of doubt on an otherwise clear canvas. I tried to shake it off, focusing on my current Project A commission for a wealthy collector in London. But the feeling persisted. That evening, I decided to surprise her. I knew she loved the covered market in Oxford, and I thought I'd bring her back some fresh pastries from one of the stalls. The drive was pleasant enough, the rolling hills of Oxfordshire bathed in the golden light of the late afternoon. I parked near Christ Church College and strolled towards the market, the scent of baking bread and brewing coffee filling the air. I found the bakery she favored and selected an assortment of her favorite treats. As I turned to leave, I saw her. Bronwyn. Not browsing books, not attending a reading. She was sitting at a small table outside a cafe, her hand intertwined with that of a man I didn't recognize. They were laughing, their faces close, their eyes locked in a gaze that spoke of intimacy and shared secrets. My world tilted. The pastries slipped from my grasp, scattering across the cobblestones. The sound seemed deafening in the sudden silence that descended around me. Bronwyn looked up, her eyes widening in horror as she saw me. The man beside her, handsome with a shock of silver hair, turned as well, a look of surprise quickly replaced by a cool, almost mocking indifference. "Caspian," she stammered, her voice trembling. "What are you doing here?" I couldn't speak. My throat was constricted, my mind reeling. I simply stared at her, at them, the betrayal a physical blow to my chest. I turned and walked away, the image of their intertwined hands seared into my memory. I didn't run, didn't shout, didn't confront. I simply walked, each step heavier than the last, the weight of 20 years of trust crumbling around me. I drove back to the cottage, the rain starting to fall, blurring the lights of the passing cars. I felt numb, detached, as if watching a movie of someone else's life. I parked the car, walked inside, and sat in my studio, surrounded by my paints and canvases. The colors seemed dull, lifeless, reflecting the emptiness that had taken root inside me. Bronwyn arrived hours later, her face pale, her eyes red-rimmed. She tried to explain, to apologize, to offer excuses, but the words were hollow, meaningless. The image of her hand in his was too vivid, too real. The trust was broken, shattered into a million irreparable pieces. "It just happened," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "It didn't mean anything. It meant everything," I replied, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. "It meant that everything I thought we had was a lie." She told me his name was Idris, that he was a visiting professor from Cardiff, specializing in Celtic mythology. She'd met him at a literary festival months ago, and they'd been meeting secretly ever since. She claimed it was just intellectual stimulation, a meeting of minds, but I'd seen the way they looked at each other. It was more than just books and ideas. "I still love you, Caspian," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I don't want to lose you, you already have," I said, turning away. "You lost me the moment you held his hand." I spent the next few weeks in a daze, going through the motions of life but feeling nothing. Bronwyn stayed in the cottage, hovering around me, begging for forgiveness. I couldn't bear to look at her. Every time I did, I saw Idris's face, their intertwined hands, the casual betrayal that had ripped my world apart. I consulted a solicitor, a stern woman named Mallory, who advised me on my options. Divorce was inevitable, but the details were complex. We owned the cottage jointly, and Bronwyn had contributed to my art career over the years, supporting me during lean times. Mallory assured me that I was entitled to a fair settlement, but the process would be long and painful. One evening, while Bronwyn was out, presumably drowning her sorrows in a local pub, I decided to do some investigating. I knew she had been meticulous about hiding her affair, but I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story than she was letting on. I started with her phone. It was password protected, but I knew her birthday. I entered the code and the screen unlocked. I scrolled through her messages, my heart pounding in my chest. There were dozens of texts from Idris, filled with longing and promises of a future together. But there were also messages from someone else, a name I didn't recognize, Alaric. The messages with Alaric were different. They were short, cryptic, and focused on money. There were references to the deal, the investment, and the payoff. I felt a cold dread creep over me. What was Bronwyn involved in? I searched her email account, using the same password. There, hidden in the depths of her inbox, I found it. A series of emails detailing a plan to sell the cottage and my artwork without my knowledge. Alaric was a property developer, and Bronwyn had been secretly negotiating with him to sell our home for a substantial profit. My art, she claimed in the emails, was overvalued and easily replaceable. Betrayal deepened, twisting the knife in my already wounded heart. It wasn't just an affair. It was a calculated scheme to rob me of everything I held dear. Bronwyn hadn't just broken my heart, she had tried to steal my life. Rage, raw and consuming, surged through me. I wanted to confront her, to scream, to demand answers. But I knew that wouldn't accomplish anything. Bronwyn was a skilled manipulator, and she would twist the truth to suit her needs. I needed a plan, a way to expose her treachery and reclaim my life. I contacted Mallory, my solicitor, and shared my findings. She was appalled but also intrigued. She advised me to gather as much evidence as possible and to remain calm. "Don't let her know you're onto her," she warned. "That will only make things more difficult." Over the next few weeks, I played the role of the forgiving husband. I pretended to accept Bronwyn's apologies, to believe her lies. I even suggested couples counseling, a charade that she embraced with enthusiasm. All the while, I was secretly documenting her every move, gathering evidence of her duplicity. I discovered that Bronwyn had already signed a preliminary agreement with Alaric to sell the cottage. She had forged my signature on the document, a clumsy attempt that Mallory assured me would be easily disproven in court. She had also been transferring funds from our joint account into a separate account in her name, slowly siphoning away our savings. The final piece of the puzzle came unexpectedly. One afternoon, while Bronwyn was at work, I received a package. It was a small, unmarked envelope containing a USB drive. I plugged it into my computer and opened the file. It was a video, recorded secretly, of Bronwyn and Alaric meeting in a hotel room. The video showed them discussing their plan, laughing about how easily they had deceived me. It was damning evidence, irrefutable proof of their conspiracy. I knew what I had to do. I arranged a dinner party, inviting Bronwyn, Idris, Alaric, Mallory, and a few close friends. It was a risky move, but I wanted to expose Bronwyn's treachery in front of everyone, to strip away her facade and reveal the truth. The night of the dinner party arrived. The cottage was filled with laughter and chatter, the atmosphere deceptively festive. Bronwyn was radiant, basking in the attention of Idris and oblivious to the storm brewing beneath the surface. After dinner, I stood up, cleared my throat, and raised my glass. "I have an announcement to make," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. "I've discovered some disturbing information about my wife." Bronwyn's face paled. She knew something was wrong. Idris looked confused. Alaric shifted nervously in his seat. My friends, sensing the tension, fell silent. I proceeded to lay out the evidence, detailing Bronwyn's affair with Idris, her secret negotiations with Alaric, and her theft of our savings. I presented the forged documents, the emails, and the video. The room was silent, the only sound the crackling of the fire in the hearth. Bronwyn's face crumpled. She tried to deny it, to claim that it was all a misunderstanding. But the evidence was overwhelming. Idris looked at her with disgust, Alaric with fear. "How could you?" Idris asked, his voice filled with disbelief. "I thought we had something special. It was just a game," Bronwyn said, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean for it to go this far." Alaric, sensing the impending legal storm, tried to distance himself from Bronwyn. I had no idea she was married, he claimed. I thought she was a single woman looking to sell her property. Mallory, my solicitor, stepped forward. That's a lie, she said, her voice sharp. We have evidence that you were fully aware of her marital status and that you actively participated in her scheme to defraud her husband. Police arrived shortly after, summoned by Mallory. Bronwyn and Alaric were arrested, charged with fraud and forgery. Idris, his reputation tarnished, quietly slipped away, his academic career in ruins. The divorce was swift and decisive. Bronwyn received nothing, stripped of her assets and facing a lengthy prison sentence. I reclaimed my cottage, my artwork, and my life. The aftermath was difficult. I struggled with anger, sadness, and a deep sense of betrayal. But I also felt a sense of liberation, a newfound freedom to create my own future. I threw myself into my art, pouring my emotions onto the canvas. I painted the storm, the betrayal, the pain. But I also painted the hope, the resilience, and the possibility of a new beginning. I eventually sold the cottage in the Cotswolds. The memories were too painful, the ghosts of Bronwyn's treachery too vivid. I moved to Cornwall, to a small studio overlooking the sea. I found solace in the crashing waves, the endless horizon, and the vibrant colors of the coastal landscape. Years passed. I remarried, a kind and gentle woman named Loena who understood my past and embraced my future. We had a small family, filled with love and laughter. I never forgot Bronwyn, but her betrayal no longer defined me. It was a chapter in my life, a painful lesson learned. I had survived, and I had emerged stronger, wiser, and more grateful for the true love that had finally found me. One day, I received a letter from Bronwyn. She was nearing the end of her prison sentence and wanted to apologize. She admitted her mistakes, acknowledged the pain she had caused, and expressed remorse for her actions. I didn't reply. I didn't forgive her. But I didn't hate her either. I simply let go. Her betrayal was her burden to carry, not mine. I had moved on, found happiness, and built a new life. That was my revenge, the ultimate triumph over her treachery. My name is Caspian, and this is my story. It's a story of betrayal, heartbreak, and ultimately resilience. It's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, hope can still bloom and that true love can conquer all. To those of you who have experienced similar pain, know that you are not alone. You can survive, you can heal, and you can find happiness again. Never give up on yourself and never lose faith in the power of love.